Hi everyone, we are back on Louder Live. This is our ninth session, and our ninth session, we will be speaking to Maria, a mother who has been through a journey that she will talk to you about. And her healing process is very inspirational as she has been inspiring us all with her loud voice. And this is why we have her here on Louder. And we're going to welcome Maria in three, two, one. Hi, Maria.
Hi, Nawal. How are you?
Good. It's nice to have you on Louder. I've been excited to have this session with you. You're very inspirational, and I'm really excited to ripple effect that inspiration into the community, into the Exhale community, and further. So, I'm really glad to have you here.
Thank you. I like the loud introduction. I think if my mom was watching this, they would probably use that adjective to describe me.
So I got it on point, and you're on the right show. That's great.
I found my purpose.
Amazing. All right. So, Maria, so you have been living your truth. You have gone through a journey, and what's different about a mother like you is that you are loud and you are speaking and being inspirational and rippling that inspiration. Can you tell us about why it's important to you to live your truth?
Hmm. I ask myself that question almost every single day, and I think I have for quite a while. Honestly, Nawal, I don't know any other way. I don't know any other way to be. I've always been someone that's been very vocal. I've always been someone that's been trying to figure things out, sometimes the hard way and sometimes the louder way. I cannot say I woke up one day and decided I was gonna, you know, do whatever it is that I do. I think I've always naturally been someone that couldn't sit still. And it got me into a lot of trouble when I was younger.
And you're continuing today to live your truth despite the painful journey that you've been through. Um, can you tell us more about your journey and your healing process? So can you take us through the grief that you've been through and then through your healing process and what you've been doing with that kind of pain?
Okay, well, to put it into context, my 21-year-old daughter passed away in October 2019. It was a very big shock to us. We didn't expect it. She was living in another part of the world. She was in Canada at the time at university studying, as they all do. And I found out by receiving a phone call from one of her friends. So it's been quite the journey that I never ever thought I would ever be on. It was never something that I ever believed my family would go through, and especially not my daughter.
And how did your daughter pass away?
So my daughter decided that she would take her life, and we didn't see it coming. We there was there was no we didn't see it coming. We didn't see the signs. We weren't able to identify the signs.
And how did you move towards your healing when you received this information? What was your journey? Can you talk to us more about that journey?
Well, Maria's a fixer. So Maria's always been someone that tries to fix something. She was always somebody that, she was a mother like every other mother out there. I think we're fixers. I think we're just created to take care of our children in the best way that we can. And Maria was someone that just had to fix any problem, and she was pretty much trying to keep things in control, or as much in control as she possibly could. When I hear you say healing, I'm like, where's that? And I don't believe that I'm anywhere near healed. I don't know if I ever will be. I don't know if anybody ever does as a parent going through something like this. Um, I think the journey started the minute I saw the missed call and the text message. As a mom, you get a gut feeling that there's something not right. And yeah, I think it all began there. And when I had the conversation with her friend, of course there was total disbelief. I actually thought it was a prank. I thought my daughter was playing some sick joke on me because it couldn't possibly be true. And then I just jumped into fixer role, and I had my best friend who I don't even remember calling. I remember making a few phone calls. One was to obviously my best friend, Lama. And the second phone call was to, I can't remember who, but I know that I phoned her father, and I phoned another friend who was living abroad. Um, and then I was in that role of fixer. It's all kind of blurry with what happened after. It's starting to come back to me, those moments of finding out. But because she lived far away, there was all this, I'm going to get there and they're going to tell me it's a mistake. Because that's what you do. You don't believe it could happen. And even when you know it's happening, you still don't believe. There's a level, I think, that you think this is a crazy mistake. When I get there, I'm just going to find out that it can't possibly be true. And of course, we had to sit down with her siblings and tell them. They're quite young as well. Um, and it's how do we tell them, and what do we tell them? So there was all that going on. But I have to say, Noel, if it wasn't for Lemma, I don't know. And she brought Maria, and it was like amazing to have them think for me while I was doing the to do. I made a to do list. Like I that's crazy. I think back and think, who on earth makes a to do list? But it was like, I think it was shock, and I think it was probably an element of me that knew I had to be strong. I had to do this without ever going through anything near anything. And I didn't know anyone who had gone through anything. So it wasn't like I had seen it or heard about it or read about it. I just kind of fell into a role. And I think that's what mothers do.
So before the point of what you went through, you had never ever read about it, been through, seen someone talk about it, or had a friend or anyone around you gone through it, correct?
The night before it happened, which actually, if you count back the hours, was around the time that my daughter had been doing it. I was having a conversation with a friend who will remain anonymous. And she was consoling and me. She was asking for support because her daughter had attempted it. And there was me trying to console her and trying to let her know, how to speak to her daughter, how to talk to her daughter, not knowing on in another few hours I would receive that news. That's how crazy life is, Nawal. So that's I don't even know, like, why I even thought I had the right to give someone any kind of advice, but I think we do that, and I'm not sure if I answered your question. Um, but no, I had no prior experience to, other than hearing, like we always hear things, but we don't ever know anyone that goes through anything like this
Yeah,
because nobody talks about it.
true. And here you are talking about it because you believe that if someone else is going through it, they should talk about it? Or what is your take on it now?
So I'm not the person. I'm not my daughter. I can't tell her story. I'm talking from the perspective of a mother who went through the after effects of what my daughter had done. Um, I don't know any other mothers that at that time I didn't know any other mothers. But you know what was happening after I had returned from Canada? I started receiving messages and letters. People were writing me letters about their experiences through the same method of losing someone or a little bit harsher. And I was like overwhelmed with the support from people who didn't want to be known for these things. And I was like, where are all these people before? Like, you know, there was the, because yeah, and I am here, I am sharing the story, and I'm hoping that there's a parent listening right now that might be worried or might be scared or might feel, you know, confused or alone, or maybe there's a teenager watching this and thinking about it or worried about it. Or, and I'm not a psychologist, I'm not going to pretend to give, I don't give anybody advice. It's not my place, it's not my right, and I'm not the professional to do it. I can only say that I believe in sharing stories, because when you do, you start to understand that everyone struggles in their life, and you learn about resilience by listening to the stories of other people's lives. And maybe they're going through something different, and maybe they're going through something that feels harsher or feels harder. But in knowing that there are struggles out there that might make you feel not so alone, I think is really important.
How old was your daughter at the time?
She was 21.
21. And today, looking at what happened, what do you tell mothers or 21-year-olds, younger or older, um, from your experience, of course, not as advice or any of that, how can they process such thoughts, or pain? How can they divert from it? Maybe you're not in your healing phase yet, so maybe you might not know what to say, and that's okay. We can completely skip that.
No, I think healing is a journey, Nawal. You know, I think when I hear that word, I assume that you're on the other side of the tunnel, right? You've kind of arrived at this destination. And I think when you're going through grief, from what I'm learning in my own experience and in the group that I've joined on Facebook and reading other people's stories, it's a journey, and it's like, you know, you sometimes have those good days and sometimes you don't. And I think that's what healing is. It's just going through those experiences. And I don't believe that when you have somebody in your life that you lose, that you ever wake up healed. I think you will always be a different person, and that experience will have an impact on you. And I'm hearing from different people that, you know, it's going to get easier, but I'm not there yet.
Where do you today put your intention?
Well, before I answer that, I'm going to answer the question you asked me about the advice that I would give to some, you know, somebody. I think honestly, and it's something that I struggle with, and I know a lot of people do, but it's reach out to help for help, ask somebody for help, you know, research help. YouTube has a plethora of videos of people talking, sharing. Just just find a way to express yourself, whatever it is. Just find the light in getting someone to hear you. And if that person doesn't hear you, find somebody else. And I think that, you know, if there's anybody out there feeling that darkness, that they think tomorrow would be a better place without them, that they really, really want to know that they matter, and that's really the essence of it.
Do you do you believe or think that your daughter was going through society society's pressure or peer pressure, bullying? Is Are any of these factors a part of her journey?
So I love that you're asking this, because I've been spending a lot of time thinking about this, and I'll never know, Nawal, what was in her mind. It's like putting a puzzle together. It's like solving a mystery that I'm never going to solve. I know that what we do in the world is we try to find a reason that would make that person do it, that would keep us safe, right? So I think what we try to do is say, okay, did they do this? Did they do that? Okay, I don't fit into those categories. Or, as a parent, you think, well, they probably, they were probably struggling at school, or they were probably taking narcotics, or they were probably, mixing with the wrong people, or they were probably this or that, or this or that. And I think as parents, we try to find a reason why it's them and it won't be our child, and if I think about my daughter, I think that obviously there was something going on for her that made her believe tomorrow would be a better place without her in it. And what that was, it's only speculation, and I don't want to be speculating, and I don't want to be, making any assumptions. I believe that I raised my daughter, as I raise all my children, to be strong, independent thinkers. They have voices, but that doesn't make them vulnerable. I think that Danya had a strong voice. Danya had um, a big presence. So I don't know what was wrong. I think she obviously was struggling with something, but I guess we'll never know. And when we went to Canada, we met different people, because you try to put the pieces together, but you'll never know.
May she rest in peace. You're doing a great job considering where you are today. Since it's only been a year, less maybe. Um, there's one more question before I move into where you're putting your intention and how you're growing out of your pain,
Yeah.
or transforming from your pain. Um, how were you able to communicate to her siblings? Is there a way that you've done it that is vulnerable, or a way that is, I can't say easy because nothing like that is easy, but a way that is, um, can't find the word. How were you able to communicate it?
Again, that falls into that blurry stage, right? So because we had to get on an airplane and get to that destination, and because her father and I were in deep, deep shock, and I had decided that my role, was going to be the person that would make sure that we were all going to be okay through this journey of 15 or 18 hours, whatever it was. And I was very, very, very conscious about who was going to be meeting us at the airport and their obvious pain. And I didn't want the children to find out that way. So I remember thinking, whatever you say next is going to have a huge impact on them, and probably something they'll remember for the rest of their life. So do it well. Um, and with my, when we told them, obviously I don't know who's listening and what their faith is, and what they believe in, but we fell on our faith, and we used that as a calling for believing in our faith and believing that it was her time. um, and saying as gently as we could. We didn't get into the details. I think back to that moment, and I think that I was more conscious about the impact of what they would remember about her in those 18 hours than anything else. So I wanted to make sure that in their mind for that time that they had sweet memories of her and where she would be.
And at the time, how old were they?
14 and 10.
So they're well aware of what's happening.
What do you mean?
So they were well aware of understanding such a situation.
They were aware
14,
that their sister had passed away. Yeah.
yeah. So today, a year later, where are you putting your intention and pain?
Well, it's not a year yet. It's 8 months.
8 months later, sorry.
Uh, my intention is to do good by my daughter. My intention is to help and to support and to protect my two younger children. That's where my intention is.
And how are you doing that today?
a lot of a lot of self-reflection, forgiveness. Uh, I've stopped. I've stopped trying to put pieces together. I'm starting to just realize that she made a choice. And as any parent that has any teenager, and I'm laughing because it's so true, we have there comes a moment in our children's life, and as parents we spend from the first day that they're born until that moment and trying to make them independent and trying to teach them the skills they need to be strong independent young adults. And then we wake up one day and we call them rebellious because they've become the strong independent young adult, but we're not prepared for it as parents. And they will make decisions that parents may or may not agree with. And I try to remind myself that my daughter had one last wish and she made a decision and she made sure that she followed through on that final decision.
And what are your biggest fear and challenges today?
I think my biggest fear is my younger two children. And I think my biggest challenge is not to overanalyze and to trust that, as parents, we do the best we can.
Yeah. Coming from a child, you parents truly do the best you can with the most that you know. Um, and it is
I,
inspiring.
I do believe that parents do the best they can with what they can and what they know. And I believe that at the core of every decision a parent makes, or I believe that they do, I hope that they do, that at the core of every decision is a heartfelt intention. And at the core of every confrontation that a child has with their parents is a voice that wants to be heard and understood. And it's somewhere in the middle that parents and children have to come together and find a way through situations that no one prepares them for.
Is there something that you can advise children, teenagers, adults, whatever it is, how they can work with their parents side by side to make it easier to parent?
Nawal, I wish there was a solution to like I wish there was a one size fits all And I really don't believe there is, because nothing makes sense for me. You know, we were parents who raised our children and they had a voice. There was always a dialogue. And you know, if this hadn't happened to Danya, my advice today would be create a dialogue with your parents, you know, create that channel of communication. But she had all those things. I think what I would suggest that any young person watching this is to trust that their parents can be there to support them through the darkest days. There's a reason they call it unconditional love. And it's only after experiencing this that I see that unconditional love is not something we tell our children. It's something we show our children, and it's in the darkest days. And unfortunately, sometimes young people don't believe that their parents will take them through those darkest days, but it's not because their parents are doing anything wrong. I feel that it's the self-judgment that young people put on themselves, and it's the fear and the assumption that they feel no one will understand. And there's always this very angelic intention from a young person that they all they really want is to make their parents proud of them, and all they really want is to be understood. And I think if there was a young person watching this, I would hope that if they felt that they couldn't speak to their parents, that maybe there was a teacher, maybe there was a friend. But in choosing that friend, it would be somebody that would identify if it's a risky challenge that needs to be shared with an adult, and not to be scared. And I think young people are scared. They're scared of getting their parents in trouble. They're scared of getting in trouble. And really, you know, for me, I think I would have rathered somebody phone me and say, get your behind over here. You need to come here now. And I would have been there. You know, I don't know if that would have changed the end result, but I know that I would encourage anyone to just reach out for help.
Before before Danya had gone through what she'd gone through, when was the last time you had spoken to her?
So that's another thing that I struggle with, because we were struggling with understanding, and this is where I was reaching out to my network of mothers who had children in that age group to identify, was it a red flag or was this normal behavior. And Danya had been in Canada for almost 4 years at that stage. And you know, year one of her being at uni, she lived with my parents. And you know, so if you kind of tick the boxes of what you should do, you know, she lived with family. And then in year two, after we felt that she had transitioned well enough, and we felt that she had transitioned into university and was able to get used to the culture changes and the changes in living and environment, that we then put her into a really safe accommodation within a really close distance from the university. And then after year two, Danya started wanting to go and move in with other roommates, because she felt that she was living alone, even though it was kind of a accommodation that was your own studio, but shared kitchen and shared lounges. And she wanted to be living with roommates, which is a really common thing to do when you go off to uni. And that's when I started to see her changing, and I started to feel the distance between us getting, like the gap getting larger and larger. And of course, as a parent, you have to identify the difference between being their friend and being their parent, and understanding the fine, very fine line between the two. And so as we entered year three, Danya started to isolate herself from family and from us. And every time we tried to get close, she would say that, you know, we're not respecting her being an adult, and not respecting her right to kind of, you know, I'm busy, mom, and I'm studying. And these were the things. But in speaking to people, everybody kept saying, you know, you need to be her friend and let her think that you're her friend. And I knew that there was something not right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Um, and so the last time I saw Danya would have been a year ago this March. So I had seen Danya. I said goodbye to Danya in the first week of April in 2019, and she passed in October of 2019. And
And
I mean, we did have text messages and brief phone calls, but that was the last time I physically saw her.
okay. And today, how are you transforming your pain? You have behind you a logo that says strong. Can you take
Yeah,
us through that journey?
yeah. So when Danya passed away, the most common word that I heard, and it didn't matter what culture, what nationality, what language, I kept hearing people telling me I had to be strong. And when they would describe Danya, they would say she was so strong. I'm not joking. It was like the international word that I just kept hearing. And it became the word that I didn't want to hear anymore. And then when we came back here and we had a gathering, because Danya grew up here. So we had a gathering here, and my 14-year-old daughter was sitting next to me. And I started to hear people telling her that she had to be strong. And I thought, no, I can't take this anymore. Like, something has to change. So one day I reached out to my video cameraman, my cameraman, and I said, "What are you doing this weekend or next week? I can't remember." And he was like, "Why?" And I said, "I'm going to start something, and I need you to videotape it. Can you do it?" And that's how much thought I put into it, Nawal. There was no business plan. There was no vision statement. There was like, I'm done with this. I'm done with people telling people going through grief that they have to be strong. This is ridiculous. So I decided to do my daughter good by creating a platform that I could bring people to talk about their life stories. And it's not about grief, it's not about my story, but it started with my story. And I thought that the one thing that I needed on this journey before it ever started was to hear other people talk about their life, so that I could identify something that was going on, and I could hear something that would give me some clues or make me feel like I wasn't going crazy. And I needed to do good by my youngest children. And I decided that, one day they're going to look back at this, and I want them to know that we did good. So it's called Strong, and we interview people all over the world. It's a 3-year social project, and I call it a social project because at the end of these 3 years, my intention is to take all of the evidence that I've gathered from all of these conversations that I'm going to be having, and I want to be bringing people together, and I want to be sharing the evidence with educators and parents and anyone who will listen, so that we can start coming together as global communities and raising our youth together and helping the youth identify with stories and helping parents feel like there's somebody else out there going through a struggle that they might have gone through. So right now we have 24 filmed episodes. We have 19 published on our YouTube channel. I've started filming season 2, where we bring Boys to Men onto the platform. And then in season 3, which will be the third year of the project, we're going to be interviewing couples and families all over the world. And we want to be understanding the journeys of people's lives. So again, I'm not here to give anyone advice. I don't give anyone advice. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm just another mom who went through a really challenging situation, who's scared like crazy that I did something wrong, and maybe I did something wrong and it might have an impact on my two younger children. That's the fear. But the belief is that there has to be something good that comes from a really sad situation. And I believe, and I hear this a lot, especially in my career. I'm a careers coach, so I help young people discover their career aspirations. But what I realize is the number one question we ask people of all age groups is, what is your purpose? And what I've learned on this journey, Nawal, is that sometimes our purpose comes through when we're no longer a physical presence. And I believe that strong was Daniel's purpose. I believe that Daniel's purpose in this world was to help people understand and connect, bring down the barriers of difference, and bring up the voice of togetherness. And that's what strong is all about.
That's so beautiful. And you said there are 19 on YouTube. What would be the YouTube handle for people to watch?
So it's all under my name, Maria Viteratos, and then
Yeah.
hashtag strong.
All right. Amazing. And how are your beautiful two children doing today?
They're amazing. The we talk about resilience with young people, and I think resilience is the youth, and watching them on their journey has been amazing. I have to say that Dr. Daniela, who works at the American Psychiatric Center here in Dubai, has been an angel that was sent to me. We found her right away. So when I came back from Canada, the first thing I did, actually, I started my search when I was still in Canada. I knew that the one thing I had to do coming back was to find someone that my two children could talk to who would not be me and would not be their father. I needed them to feel that they could connect with someone who would make sense of it. And then, of course, we told my 14-year-old daughter what really happened when we were there, and we waited a little bit longer to tell my 10-year-old son, because I felt that he needed to know the truth, and it was unfair that we were telling him telling him what was not true, because then when he would find out, it would create bigger issues. But without Dr. Daniela, we would not have been able to do it. So I think because of her amazing support and their inner beauty and their growth and their kindness and who they are as humans, they're healing. A very slow process, but they're on their journey.
I'm very happy to hear that. And how did you get your um they went to see someone, and how were you able to cope with it? Were you able to see someone too, or what was your journey on that?
So after I made sure the kids were okay, the next protocol was their father, and to try and make sure that he was okay. You know, it was a lot harder for us because I think as adults, you think I can fix myself,
Mm,
and especially with what we were going through. So it wasn't grief where your child was sick and then they passed on because of an illness. We had this secret that we were not allowed to share because of how it would impact the family, and how it would what would people say. And I was told that we were not allowed to share the truth because of this. So we were not just going through grief, we were going through the false grief of having to resonate with something that didn't make any sense. So finding support was really challenging because of the type of support that we needed. And then of course there was all this, where do you go? And so I ended up, my daughter, actually my 14-year-old daughter, had said, if you guys don't get help, then we're not going to go anymore. It's not fair that we have to see somebody and you don't. But don't forget that Dr. Daniela, and I'm going to keep saying her name because anyone that is dealing with a child going through any type of grief or any anxiety issues, you know, she's amazing, and she's at the American and Psychiatry Center here in Dubai. I don't work for them. I don't get any profit. I'm just telling you, she was amazing. So whenever we met for the children, she always took 10, 15 minutes to talk to me. So I feel that she was my person as well. And then I did go see someone who was in the same clinic, and he did a questionnaire. You know, he asked me a few questions, and then referred me on to somebody in a different clinic, and I was put on a waiting list for 3 months. And even with a referral, I was still put on that waiting list, and I was actually, because I remember I was pleading with my daughter to keep seeing Dr. Daniela, and I knew that if I didn't get somebody, that you know she might not want to go anymore. And I was trying to explain this to the person on the other side of the phone, and unfortunately, we never managed to get anyone to support us in that way. Her dad ended up reaching out to someone, but for me, it didn't work out.
I think maybe what you're doing with strong is your form of expression and your form of, or your way of healing, for now. But did you try to reach out to someone else after no one reaching out to you?
So with something like this, you don't just go to anybody. And I think because of my personal journey in my self awareness and my self reflection, um, you don't just go to anybody. So I'm doing a lot of reading about grief, just you know, doing what I tell people to do. I'm watching a lot of shows on YouTube. I'm googling. I'm listening to a lot of stories of people. I'm part of a group on Facebook of parents going through grief, and I'm doing what I know best in allowing myself to go through the process and connecting with real people. And I do believe that the interviews that I have with people and listening to their stories has really helped me to identify that we all go through struggles. Will I ever find the right person to be talking to? I hope so. But again, I would rather reach out to the right professional than go through the wrong professionals
Yeah,
and get angry. And I don't want to go through the anger stage. I want to go through the stages of remembering my daughter in the right way and allowing the process to unfold naturally.
that is very brave. Do you believe in empathy and vulnerability?
Oh, vulnerability. This is your raw vulnerability, you know. I'm live on Facebook telling a story, a part of the story that I've never shared publicly. Vulnerability is allowing yourself to take off the mask and tell a story, knowing that there's somebody out there that's potentially going to judge you, but doing it anyway. Vulnerability is standing in front of a room with your daughter in a casket because she made that choice. That's vulnerability. So, you know, nothing will ever get harder than what I already went through. And empathy, you know, I believe that empathy, there's a bit of a facade behind empathy. Empathy is believing that we can walk in somebody's shoes and support them through that process. Nobody could walk in my shoes unless you've walked in my shoes. I could not walk in my shoes. I can't walk in Dania's shoes. I have no idea what Dania was going through for certainty that would allow me to even prove empathy. I think empathy is something that we hope we can have, but I don't believe that there's evidence. And I think when we pretend to be empathetic, it actually can become really annoying to the other person, because how can you be empathetic if you've never walked in the person's shoes? I think we have to call it something else. I think it has to be renamed to holding somebody's hand through their pain and accepting that you can't fix it, but just holding their hand, like Lama did for me and Maria had done for me. I remember these two women next to me. They made sure that I was eating even though I wasn't hungry. They made sure that I wasn't alone. They packed for me. They did all those things for me. That's empathy. They were here when I needed them. That was empathy. Receiving messages from people that I knew over 20 years ago that I can't believe would have reached out to me. That was empathy. But walking in my shoes, unless you've walked the path that I'm walking right now, I don't think anyone can. I think what we want to remember, and I try to do this on the strong platform, is by sharing our stories, we're giving somebody a glimpse of a part of your life that they can't understand, but that they're going to hold your hand and listen to anyway. And I hope that answered your question.
It did and beyond. Um, so I'm more than thankful that you are sharing your perspective and your path with us, your journey, your experience, because I do believe in empathy, but empathy in your situation and in situations where such pain is present, that is beyond empathy. I don't, as you said, this kind of empathy won't exist when it comes to maybe losing someone to death. That is difficult. And I believe compassion is something that is that is a must in your surrounding. And I hope that we are able to send that message out to everyone, whoever is struggling, that they should be surrounded with compassionate beings. And if they are struggling mentally, emotionally, they should reach out. To, as you said, to never fear their parents' judgment, despite fearing that they won't be accepted. Um, if I were to talk of why I was very interested to have you here today, is speaking of vulnerability. I believe vulnerability is the most important aspect of human life. Because as you said, empathy is hard to achieve. In my perspective, empathy is achievable only when we are able to share stories, to share our voice. Because now, today, I am able to feel with you just 0.001% of what you are feeling. But if you weren't sharing the story with me, then I would have not been able to hear it except from a very far away stranger. Today, I feel closer to you and closer to this topic and closer to Danya. Today, Danya will be in my prayers. Your kids, your other kids will be in my prayers. And this is what we get from sharing our stories, that we become united together in compassion, in empathy. And I think this is so important because if I were to talk about my journey, I am someone who struggled with it, struggled with what Danya was struggling with. I reached to a point where I thought about it, and I reached to a point where I was on the edge. And you might not be able to tell what Danya was thinking, but if I can say what I was feeling, is if I didn't have the person that was next to me, or a person that I can call, or a family doctor that I felt safe with, I will say that I might have gone through with it. If I didn't do the phone call that I needed to do, if I wasn't afraid of my mom's judgment, or my dad's judgment, or my brother's judgment, or any of that, I think I would have gone through it, in my perspective. And I'm so thankful for the person that took my call. I'm thankful for the person who stood by me. And I'm thankful for my mother and father being super patient because they too were in Canada. So it was just, they were in Canada, I was here. And some things are unfortunate, you know, and if I had gone through with it, I would I would have never blamed my parents. Just to let you know that. I can't tell you what Danya was thinking, but I don't think she would ever blame her family for any of what she had gone through. And not, I can't speak on her behalf, but I speak from my experience. If I had gone through it, I would have never blamed them because I think life takes us through journeys that it's out of our parents' hands to control. Like you said, right? You're raising rebels, you were raising independent women, and we become so. We become so. And when we reach the point of we can use our voice, we want to use it. And we're not aware of what is on the other side when we start using it. Um, we're not aware that there are internal struggles that we might face and that we're not ready to face. There are many things that might become the obstacle and the challenge. And for someone who is as sensitive as me, for example, they become magnified. And this is where the anxiety and the depression and leading to these kind of thoughts. So I'm just being vulnerable here because it's like talking about two different sides. You're talking as a mother, and I'm talking as a child who went through it and didn't go through it at the same time. This is why genuinely I wanted you to be here because I feel like for both of us, and I think this is the first time I say this live too, Maria, thank you for allowing me to be vulnerable in that subject. And thank you for sharing your story, sharing your vulnerability, your emotions, your strength to be here today after 8 months is something beyond. And I hope you know that. And I hope you know that there is no way that your voice is not rippling, that is not rippling into healing others.
You know, Nawal, there's something that I really want anyone listening to remember. Sometimes when, and this is why I do what I do, I think what we try to show our children is this idea of strength, and mothers especially, and fathers as well. We don't show them the vulnerable side of who we are because we don't want to scare them. We don't want them to see that. We want to protect our children. And in doing that, I feel that sometimes we're not preparing them for the realities of life.
Yes.
And what I'm doing right now with Strong, what I'm doing right now with Strong is I'm bringing forward regular people like myself to show the youth behind this that you think is strong, there's that vulnerable side. You know, we don't wake up Beyonce. We don't. We go through a process of ups and downs, and behind every strong person is a person that is going through a battle of their own. And you know, I want everyone to understand that my struggle doesn't make your struggle less important. My grief doesn't make your bad day any less difficult. And this is what we have to remember, especially with the youth, when they come to us and they tell us that they're having a bad day, that we have to stop what we're doing and try to listen without giving advice, because what we don't want them to feel like they can't talk to us because their problem isn't as big as our problem was. And I think sometimes we do this unconsciously, and we do it with friends and we do it with family. And what we want to remember is that if you had a bad day at work and it made you feel really anxious, I need to give you the space to tell me what that felt like, and stop telling people, you know what, if you think you had a bad day, my daughter passed away, and that's what real life is hard, right? We have to say, that sounds really, really like you had a crappy day. What can I do? How can I support you? And not fix it, because you can't fix it. And me being here today, Nawal, I'm not here. This is not Maria. Strong is not Maria. I never would have done this. I'm doing this because I hated the fact that I could not protect my daughter through that process. And I know because of the letters that were written to me, the messages that were sent to me, the conversation I had with my friend, not even 24 hours before, I know 100% with certainty that if my daughter had reached out to somebody, that I hope they would have been able to let her be with me today. And the only way for that to happen is that we start making it okay for young people to hear these stories.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I 100% agree with what you said about parents don't show their vulnerable side. We grow up into the world thinking that the feelings and the sensitivity that you're going through is odd, and only you are going through it, and the sadness is odd, and I think this is what causes the heaviness, let alone if a child is going through bullying or social pressure or God knows drugs or whatever it is. When you're not able to speak, as you said, um, all this is condensed into a form inside of you that needs to be released, and sometimes it erupts into your brain with into a negative thought pattern that never ends, and it's a cycle that never ends. um anyway, I'm really glad that you were able to open up with us today. I hope we are rippling your story and your inspiration. We have a lot of
No, well, it's not my story. So this is what's really important. My story is not strong. We're everybody's story. It's everybody's story that helps the youth. It's not one person. Dania inspired me to bring this to life, but this is not Dania's story. This is not Maria's story. And you're the first person I talked to publicly since I put out my introduction video to bringing the story to life, because this is not my story. And I don't want people to look at this and say her story. We're all, this is our story, our youth. You know what? If one young person is happier today, it's a ripple effect on everybody else. That one person is going to go into the world and have an impact. So it's all of our stories. And this is really important for us to understand. And I think what we're going through right now with the pandemic is evidence that it's a ripple effect.
correct. I hope our story, Maria, ripples effect into the world and inspires every human being struggling with pain or suicidal thoughts, depression, anxiety, any of that. I hope they know that they can reach out to this community, the exhaler community, Maria's community, Maria's strong community, where she was inspired to do this for the strength of the community. I just want to go through some of the beautiful messages you're receiving here and show them on the screen. Um, Here, Elena is thanking you for showing your pain and your honesty, and you have let her to share her story too. Um,
She's a beautiful person, by the way. I met Elena through Strong. She was one of my guests on the show. Her episode hasn't been published yet, but just an example of the amazing human beings that
yeah,
I'm able to meet right now.
that is beautiful. There is also Cortesia. This is a beautiful insight. What you're sharing. Amina.
Cortesia is a young person. She's in her 20s and she's a multiple sclerosis advocate. She is trying to create an awareness in the Middle East around multiple sclerosis. Again, another human being that I met because of Strong. She's amazing, a brilliant young person.
beautiful community that you're building with Strong, and I hope everyone can see that and join. Amina,
Amina's our makeup artist on Strong. Erica's she was my Canadian pal at work, and she's a mental health nurse back in Canada. Brilliant, you know, so many amazing people. I'm
yeah,
blessed in my life, Nawal. I've got beautiful people surrounding me. It's a real
and
blessing.
and you are a beautiful person, Maria. Truly. Again, I want to thank you for being with us on Louder, and there's not much more words to say. Really, I really thank you.
Thank you, Nawal. I appreciate that you had us here today. And I really appreciate that you've shared your story too, Noel. It's important that more people like you come forward.
Our story.
Our story. You're right.
Thank you, Maria, so much, and we will speak soon.
Take
Much love.
care. Bye.
Goodbye.